brought that because I wanted to talk to you about that. Okay.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the December 2nd meeting of the Business and Community Affairs Committee. Today we are going to be talking about neighborhood commercial, which is a subject I'm pretty passionate about. So I'm really excited to see what staff's put together, and I'll go ahead and open it up for Ms. Hudson to start with the presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jane Hudson, Norman Planning Department. So I've got a presentation here that's we outlined the neighborhood commercial as well as the accessory commercial units, ACU. I always get that backwards. And so, you know, it was really interesting in the memo. I was really surprised at how much information there is out there for neighborhood commercial, accessory commercial units. And while we don't have a lot here, doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just that there's not a lot here. So it was really in some of the larger areas. But one of the definitions that I found is, you know, that every residential neighborhood, you know, has its needs, such as grocers, hardware, but more importantly, it's an area that's, you know, set aside that, you know, when you get to that area, you realize that you're in the commercial area that's servicing that neighborhood. You know, you can see a difference. And I did highlight where it says centers here. I don't know that we necessarily want a center. I think that worried me just a little bit. We really want more of what you were describing, Councilmember Peacock, in your communication is, you know, the corner store, the bodega.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely something that fits the character of the neighborhood, like this picture.
Right, see? Okay, and then I wanted to go over too, because I thought it was really interesting in doing some of the research. I was kind of toggling back and forth between looking on the internet, looking at our zoning ordinance. And if you look at the general description that we have for local commercial, and remember this was 1954, so I thought it was interesting because it specifically says it's intended for the conduct of retail trade and to provide personal services to meet the regular needs of the people of adjacent residential areas, and it's an integral part of the neighborhood and so on and so forth. But while a lot of the uses that are in the C1 really would fit in this category, there are some that don't. And so I didn't know if maybe that's something with your direction or whatever you guys want to do moving forward. You know, you could look at possibly breaking out some of those uses that are in the C1 and more specifically directing those to that neighborhood commercial use. Just a thought. So staff went through and gathered some of these pictures for me, so I wanted to just throw these around. Here's Angleton, Texas. Here's one up in Edmond. I thought this was really interesting. Big one. This is San Marcos. Got a spa. Georgetown, Texas, dentist. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly what that is, but you've got the State Farm there as well. This is in Denton. Specifically says office and parking, so you know we've got some uses going on there aside from residential. So then we also had the accessory commercial unit. And with the accessory commercial unit, you know, it's an alternative to prime commercial space, and that you can establish the retail destination in close proximity where they live. And some of these pictures that I'm going to show you are amazing. I was shocked. It was very cool. Portland, Oregon. Clearly, you've got the house there. You've got the commercial unit, you know, in the front. Some of these might not be, you know, as attractive as some people want, but still, it's getting the use there into that neighborhood. You've got the house in the back. I mean, that's a huge house. And then they've got that commercial use there in the front with the picnic tables or whatever they've got there. I thought that one was very interesting. I thought this one was very cool. Got the basement there. And I really wonder what these were before they turned them into these uses. I wish we could go there and like do the research on them because I thought that's so cool. Waterloo, Ontario. I think we've got the residential on the left. We've got the office there or whatever that is on the right. California. Some of these are very intense structures, I guess I could say, you know, so maybe it's not something that would fit in some of the neighborhoods here, but there's still the smaller option that we could look at possibly. Something here. This is again from California, Oregon. And then we went around and we looked at some of the ones that we have here in Norman. So of course everyone knows this is Midway. I put the zoning map up there because I thought it was important for everyone to see what is around some of these uses, what the zoning is that's around them. Obviously this is R1 around this business. Oops, sorry, hold on.
Councilman Rawl.
To Midway?
Yeah, because this is really an interesting example that I'm more familiar with than some of the others. Because Midway is literally zoned commercial and has been for a long time.
884, it was with the original zoning ordinance in 884.
And the parcel directly behind it that you see on the map is also zoned commercial. So this is really the local example of what we're talking about. It's small, the footprint is small, it's contained, it's on a corner, it's not stuck in the middle of a block, people can walk to it. Anyway, it's just interesting to me that this is really how this was designed in the first place. And there's another parcel on Lahoma that's being, I think there's a building permit for it now, built at Lindsay and Lahoma, also zoned commercial, just that parcel on the corner. So we have a history of this type of thing.
So I think that's key. I'm glad you brought that up. If just to digress just a little bit, I think it's important to look at these that are successful. They're on the corners.
Yeah.
And, in my memo, looking at the accessory commercial units, those really are going to go into the neighborhood, and it worries me that those could be a negative impact on the neighborhood in some form or fashion, especially if it's something you put in the front. I know the pictures are cool, but I'm just thinking about how Norman, works. And as you look at these, this is definitely retail. Some of the other pictures I've got here in a little bit, you'll see the differences as they go in deeper into the neighborhood, and they're more office uses and stuff.
Yeah, I think you hit a key point there that this is very context specific. You've got to have the right parcel in the right location.
Exactly.
You want to minimize the impact on the neighborhood. And I think even this example, it's got a lot of parking, so it's not necessarily the ideal scenario in my opinion. I think this area has enough people living around it that you don't need parking. You could just sustain a business like this purely with pedestrians. So that's my vision when I look at this. I think the next example really kind of speaks to that as well.
Well, and another thing too, you think about how close this is, how close Midway is to the backside of the strip mall on Main Street, the old Firestone strip mall there. There's that parking that's back there on the back. I mean, that's something that people could utilize and walk to Midway. So,
That's more of a condensed, compact footprint right there.
and this was with 884, the zoning, the 1954 ordinance, but it is C1, and the parking goes around the back, so they are very condensed there in the space, and it is mid-block. It's south of Main, but it is still in an area that's populated. You've got the park down there, so there's a lot of activities that are going on around this one as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so my comment about the earth is this is a really deep lot, and so it does accommodate parking in the back, and it also is deep enough that it accommodates outdoor dining behind. So again, really context specific, and that's probably why they've been so successful and worked as well as they have all these years.
Absolutely. And I think the majority of these examples that are going to be successful are probably going to be in Pool Norman. I'm not sure that you can replicate this necessarily in some of the larger lot neighborhoods.
I don't think you could. I think that would be a huge concern, honestly.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
I do think it's possible. It's just getting very based on the details.
Definitely.
Councilman Tortorella.
So I got a question, just being new here on the commercial neighborhood project or the zoning. Is it to be or congruent on the surrounding neighborhood when they
putting a business location to make sure it fits into the neighborhood surrounding the building, the look, the feel, and that the idea of this neighborhood commercial thing we're talking about today?
If we're looking at rezoning a tract, yes. I mean, I would think that as an applicant came in, I think that this should be something that council looks at. I think that if this is something that's going to move forward, as I said in the memo, I really don't think that this can be a use by right. I just really don't think it can. I think this is something that an applicant has to come to council for. I know I repeated it a couple times in the memo, but this has to be very precise. We really have to evaluate what are the existing conditions, not only what this applicant is going to come in with, but when they sell this business to someone else, what are the controls going to be in place that we're going to be able to assist the adjacent property owners when they have a concern, or they come to the city with, this is a new property owner and they're not following the guidelines that you guys adopted 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think that's, yes, I think that's very important that we follow those considerations and look at what the existing neighborhood is.
Another question, Paul. What's the document you mentioned that was passed 5 years ago? What plan was that? You had mentioned that, was that in a general statement about a 5-year-ago plan, or was there a document plan?
I was just saying if someone came in and got the zoning and then 5 years later another property owner purchased it and made a lot of changes, yeah. Yeah.
Do me a favor, you three, come sit down here.
Mic's not working.
The two mics on that end completely have gone out on me, and so they either sound like robots or or they sound like nothing.
You don't need to hear what I'm saying anyway. Well, I think, when I originally envisioned this...
You want to sit in your spot, dude?
Yeah, sure. I kind of thought that it would have its own unique permit application in which we'd have a whole separate set of criteria that, again, needs to be on a corner lot, needs to have a certain amount of setback in the front, needs to have a lot of these things, and we could really tease that out in a unique application. Maybe that... I'm not really sure how that's structured yet, but I think if we were to do it as something that came before council, I'd like to make it as easy as possible for those people that want to do this. It's not... I don't see big out-of-state developers wanting to come in and do these kind of projects. This is very much going to be a local business, local startup. So again, want to make it as easy as possible with that, while keeping those safeguards in place. And
I completely agree with you. I think so when you guys see a PUD come forward right now, you see the specific uses that are allowed within that PUD. They've got their list, and everything. And I think we would have to have very concise definitions of those uses that would be allowed on this lot. It wouldn't just be retail. It would have to be, grocery store that provides, literally bread, milk, eggs. Just something so basic like that that would keep the guidelines in place, as opposed to opening it.
And I'm thinking you've got maybe a handful of 7 to 10 uses that are allowed, nothing beyond that, definitely no liquor stores, nothing like that, just stuff that fits in the neighborhood, services that neighborhoods could use. I don't want to just stick commercial with big parking lots and gas stations in the middle of neighborhoods. That's not the goal of this. So I think we're on the same page.
I just, one of my favorite, this is kind of neighborhood commercial. I'm so jealous of the people on the west. I live on the east side, the west side of town, because the Starbucks sits over there in the Brookhaven.
Right.
We go over there to have they bring their dogs. They sit out there at the tables. They visit.
Yeah.
There's conversation. It's just, I love that place. It's one of my favorite places. So we could get one on the east side. Okay, so here we are at the Earth. The next one. This was interesting. This used to be the industrial site, and then several years ago it was rezoned to allow a restaurant to come in, and we recommended that they get the C3 zoning so that they wouldn't have the parking requirement, but there is the public parking across the street, and stuff like that. So time passed and somebody else purchased the property, and the Yellow Dog Coffee, Equity Brewing, there was a medical marijuana processor, and they were just doing pre-rolls, but you all saw the brewing and the processor recently, about moving those forward. But if you look at the the location map, where this is, it's right there at the edge of the R3, and of course across from Andrews Park, from the city offices, as well as now the new library to the north, and then you're just 2 blocks north of Main Street.
Right.
So you really have a lot of activity on this one as well.
There's a bookstore there now too,
Oh, is there? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so there you go.
just books.
So going into the neighborhoods a little bit further, this is one of the ones that we, again, it was R3 with the original 884, 16, 17, 12, adopted a special use for this office for the Nicholson Law. And as you can see in the zoning map there, they're, get this to, I guess I can't get it, but it is completely surrounded by the residential area. It is on Peters, so it's not necessarily one of the side streets, but it does have more traffic than you would see on some of the side streets. But again, this is bringing the office use into some of the residential areas. This is 309 South Peters. We saw this one a year ago or so, and they were going to put the cafe in there. But this is an ideal location. I so hope somebody takes this one and runs with it, because it's across from the courthouse. It's north of the Miller Historic District. You've got a lot of activity on sidewalk activity.
So have they abandoned?
I've just not heard anything.
He's still working on it.
Okay,
I just
good.
wanted to delay it a little bit.
Good. I didn't want to reach out to him, but good. That's wonderful.
Okay,
I'm so excited
I'm
about
so
that.
glad. I thought he was still
Yeah.
moving forward, just slow down.
Just waiting for the right time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wait a little bit longer.
Good.
Well, and I think there's quite a bit of hail damage too that he got surprised with.
A lot of other factors. Yeah. So we've got this one, and I think this one will be a huge success
I
once
agree.
it gets off the ground.
I remember when this one came through council, I'm making the comments saying, I wish we could see more of this, and it's exactly this conversation we're having right now, so.
Yeah,
Councilman
and
Hall.
obviously I have a lot to say about this topic. It's just, these examples are really the perfect examples, because this is the last existing residential structure in this block. And thankfully, we had a local business proposal that, wants to preserve the building, has a plan to have some outdoor dining. It did come to council, and this is, to me, the kind of thing that we're talking about, especially in the core of repurposing existing structures, not just scraping and starting over with something that does not fit into the neighborhood. So another great example, and I
Absolutely.
can't wait for that one to open.
And I think that's key. I really want these to be utilizing the existing structures. I would hate to think that they would be coming in and tearing down some of the existing structures just to build a new one, because then it's going to be completely out of character for
Sure.
the neighborhood.
Sure.
So I really hope that maybe, and I don't know if that could be a requirement. I mean, we'd have to visit with the legal department to see if we could actually make somebody do that, but still, that would be a good option.
And
Well-
the other key point with this project is he had no interest in any new parking.
Right.
Because it's intended to be walkable, and there's plenty of shared parking in the area. There's no reason to create more, didn't even ask or want any additional parking. He wants it to be a walk-up type of place.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I believe it would be, like I said, it's north of Miller. It's, just south of Main Street. I think they would get a lot of business across, the railroad tracks are not even, a block away. And yeah, so I think it would be wonderful. We got the Rock House Neighborhood Bar, which is part of the Center City Form-Based Code. They actually did rezone to do the CCPUD to get the reuse of that structure, as well as the multifamily there to the east of this site. And then they also do have some space on the ground floor of the larger building that you see there on the right for office, retail, whatever they can get in there. I completely understand that they're struggling a little bit to get some retail use on the bottom floor down there right now, but I think we've got some opportunities coming with some of the changes that are down there, so hopefully that this will be a turning point.
Councilman Hall.
So this is another really great example of what we're talking about, and I'm so grateful to the business owners that made the commitment to preserve this little rock house, especially in an area that's undergoing a complete redevelopment. And that mix of preserving some of what makes this part of town so attractive, that these two things can coexist, and this is a perfect example of why you want to use a SPUD or a CCPUD in this instance. And I am so optimistic about the mixed-use piece on this particular parcel, especially since we just opened the well. The whole idea
Yes.
for the James Garner corridor right there is intended for just this kind of thing, that active street, that mixed use, having all kinds of interesting things on that main floor, and I think with the well, we're going to be able to, that's going to jumpstart all of that.
I agree completely. And I think you touched on something interesting a second ago. You mentioned office.
Yeah.
And I think in the kind of the post-COVID environment where the appeal and the desire to work from home is so much more prevalent, just making that easier. But again, doing it in the right way. I don't think we want offices in all of our neighborhoods, but allowing it up to certain kinds. I think of Brick House Dental right over here when it was in the brick house, and it was very. I'm not saying that their new building is bad or anything, but just that smaller structure fit the neighborhood, and it didn't overpower or anything. So
And again, a corner lot,
corner lot.
so.
The other thing that Center City allows that's probably worth mentioning too, because you touched on it a little bit in your report, is this is, I think, the only place in town that allows for a live-work combination.
In orange.
Yeah. Yep. Which is.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we already have that capability in Center City.
Okay. Well, so, I know there's hesitancy to do it by right. Maybe that would be an area that you could say that these are allowed by right. I mean, if it's already, right, if it's already designated to be kind of geared towards that.
Yeah, you can already do it, but no one's taken advantage of it yet.
That's interesting.
Yep, it's already allowed in Center City.
Okay.
Another good one.
Yeah, the Virgin Law office is there.
Who's on
So
Ward 4?
Yeah, of course.
beautiful house and just a beautiful structure,
Yeah.
and it's been there for many, 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 many years, and they've just kept up the area. I mean, again, corner lot. I keep going back to that. It's key. I mean, it's and the other part of it too, corner lot. It's the visual for the business as opposed
Absolutely.
to being tucked into mid-block for some of the other uses. But
And you basically double your on-street parking as well on a corner lot. You're exactly on a mid-block building. You've got spaces right in front of the building. Well, now you've got both sides of the street and around the corner both sides of the street.
Talk about being completely integrated into the residential neighborhood. You would never know that it's a law office,
I
really.
completely agree. That's the key.
no, absolutely. Well, same thing for the one I had before, the Nicholson Law Office. I mean, essentially they've made zero changes there, and you don't see a lot of traffic coming in and out and stuff like that. So. So that's the end of my presentation. But I'm happy to discuss this. Happy to take additional direction to figure out what your thoughts are. Get some more information. Come back.
I personally think you showed some great examples of what to do and what not to do. I personally I would love to see kind of the next step and teasing out some of that criteria. What does make these examples successful? What are things we can improve on? Obviously the corner lot is a huge part of the calculus there, but I think there's got to be more to it than just that, and I'd really be interested to see what kind of the variables are that make good ones and make bad ones. I'd be happy to hear from my fellow council members as well.
Well, another example I want to throw out there that's mid-block would be the library bar. Has successfully been integrated into a historic district since the 20s. And, they haven't expanded their footprint. They've made do with what they have. They have limited parking, completely walkable. I mean, there's bikes, there's dogs, and that's in the middle of the block.
Yeah.
It's right next to, a 2-story rental unit.
But it's
So,
packed all the time.
Yeah.
It's in high demand.
And, the other thing that is interesting to me about all of these places is I think Midway would be the only place where there is some tension with the residents in the neighborhood with the parking.
Okay.
And so, I think that's something that we would want to consider because, I know there's been a lot of emphasis with that particular business to encourage people, even in the neighborhood, don't bring your car, walk here.
I second that because when I drive, I'm not from that ward. I can't find a spot to park my car.
Oh, part of the Charm Award for
It is. It is. But I mean, I think at the same time, you'll park a couple blocks away and walk if you have to.
I find a parking spot all the way, so I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. So I think, overall, I'm definitely interested in pursuing this, but, and I'm just obviously going to speak from just some really particular concerns with Core Norman, because a lot of times when we talk about these things, I loved in your comment in the staff report is this is not a one-size-fits-all thing.
It's not
And
at all.
we have seen and experienced over and over and over, you can flash up these pictures that everybody resonates with and goes, yeah, that's what we want. We want the library bar, and we want the Rock House bar, and we want the law office, and we want all this. And then it turns into something completely unintended.
And that's where the regulations come in.
And
I
so-
think that's key.
For me personally, I'm definitely interested in pursuing it, but I'm also, I would rather have it more narrowly focused than broad. I think it does need to be simple to encourage people to try it. In Core Norman in particular, I think there has to be an emphasis on using what we have and not clear-cutting it and starting over with something new that does not fit with the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I like to point to over and over and over again, I mean, there have been so many different studies and consultants that we've invited to Norman, and this community has been surveyed multiple times, and one of the things that always rates really, really high is the personality, the charm, what I like to call the heart and soul of all of these funky, quirky neighborhoods, and that's what is attractive to people. And I think in Core Norman especially, we really have to pay attention to that. So I was really intrigued by your idea of neighborhood, I don't even know what it would be,
request.
neighborhood engagement, or neighborhood, like, petitioning the neighborhood, to have, again, I don't want to be onerous. I want to really encourage creative locals, like all of these examples that you've seen.
Yeah.
Find that path to clear the way to that sort of thing, but also have a standard of expectation of, if this is what you say you're going to do, we would like to hold you to doing that.
Right.
So that's one of probably my biggest fears.
Well, I think keeping existing structures should just be baseline criteria for these. I think.
I mean, that may not necessarily be the case for other places in town, but I think it's definitely something that the residents in Core Norman would be
I can
more-
get behind that.
Yeah, more, would welcome these types of businesses into their neighborhoods, especially when you use the examples that have been so successful. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking
Right.
about ramping that up to something that starts making the neighborhood crazy.
No, I agree, and I think every example you showed was an existing structure. There wasn't a single new build in any of those examples. And I think that also makes it easier if we were going to do this as a SPUD, I don't want people to have to go and hire an attorney
Right.
to write a
Right,
SPUD to
no.
get these done, So if we could make it,
No
if
reason
you're
for
using
that.
an existing structure, then there's a lot of things baked into that would maybe not require such an extensive PUD or SPUD. So
So I'm hopeful that as we go through this, it's like you walk into the sandwich shop and you check off the items that you want.
That, I was just gonna say,
You know,
is
and-
it possible to do some type of checklist?
And say, if you have, I mean, you have an existing structure and this is what we'd like to do, and then that's what they get to do
Yeah.
until the next person comes along. So I don't think it has to be a spud because we're not looking at open space conditions.
Okay.
We're not looking at parking. We are looking at coverage. I want to make sure that they're, I mean, if they wanted to put an outdoor patio, that'd be great, but we're not going to be looking at putting in a new parking lot, so I don't think that they would get over the 65%. Maybe they would. Maybe that would be part of the request that they could have, but I don't know,
Well,
something like that instead of having to do a PUD or a spot.
I think that's the goal, and I think the 65%, that's fair, because again, we don't want these to be overpowering the neighborhood. So if you allow somebody to do 100% coverage on their lot, it's probably not going to fit in with the houses that are around it. So I'd be fine with that. Just want to make it as easy as possible. I think that's really my key.
And I think, again, specific to the older parts of town that I think we're all interested in preserving and, has that cool factor that a lot of people are attracted to. And that, as we progress with this and think about rolling it out, that it really is to serve the immediate neighborhood. That we're really not, what are the types of things
Right.
that people are going to walk to and not create a place that somebody wants to drive to
No,
necessarily.
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there's no parking for the Rock House Bar, I don't think, other than on-street parking. And, I would not want to see any kind of expanded parking. I mean, part of the model really needs to be serving the neighborhood, and that it's going to mostly be pedestrian or transit traffic or, something like that. And so the reason I brought this is the final draft of the comp plan, which is also on our list of goals for our council this year, to revisit that. But, it hasn't been adopted yet there are some really interesting forward-thinking ideas about this. So, for example, in Core Norman, it's pretty much defined as a neighborhood type, defined as compact detached. And when you look at it, there's literally an accommodation for neighborhood commercial nodes. And they're located, mixed use, small scale, that serves the local residents. And again, we keep showing pictures, very small, interesting, active street, placemaking type of things, and limited. And I think one of the things that we talked about over and over again when we talked about the comp plan, especially in this neighborhood type, was things that were allowed by location and by design. And so I think that's actually something that we could talk about here and use some of the things that were recommended by this consultant group as we move forward.
That's really interesting. I think that's a perfect tie-in to all this.
Did I see that?
Yeah.
And when I first pitched this idea, I think I said, let's start with the kind of the corner grocery store idea. Just basic services. It's 8 o'clock at night. You're trying to, make breakfast or whatever, make dinner for that night, and you need milk. You walk down a block and go grab some milk. It's not anything that's not going to be wanted in a neighborhood.
The reason I can get behind this is that, I was raised in Germany, and most of everything we do is within walking distance.
Yeah.
Even the discos and the bars, but
Even
the bla-
better. You can walk home.
Well, that's not where I was going with this, but I see your point. But I think, for Core Norman, this would be a perfect fit, because I can certainly see the appeal of leaving your house and going down and getting coffee. Like we talked about, we don't have that in Ward 5 anymore, so that one little restaurant we had out there closed on Alameda, and so I can certainly see the appeal. But we're not going to be landlocked, or at least, this is a new concept that you guys are talking about in this arena, right, for building, for new permits?
Well, in Oklahoma, it's a new concept, but if you go to any East Coast city or anywhere else, that there's that historic density.
Probably similar to what you experienced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Places that were built before the car was really a thing, where people, you had to walk to get places. That was your primary mode of transportation, so they built things at a scale that people could walk to. I think it's what we're trying to replicate here, and that's why it fits so well in Core Norman.
I like the idea. I can get behind this. Certainly get behind this, because anything that promotes economic development within the community,
Mhm.
that makes it transparent, or not really transparent, but part of the community where we can get it passed. I think this works for us and works for everybody.
Yeah, because it's taking areas that traditionally aren't sales tax producers and injecting a little bit of revenue.
And with
a
that
little
comes
bit of-
with higher property values and everything as we grow.
if it's done right. I think it could negatively impact property values if it's not checked, if it's not.
Well, I think what we're talking about, this will be done right.
I think so.
So I like this. We're gonna get a copy of this.
I can
The
take
planning
care of that for you.
department. It's a draft, and it's going to be resurrected shortly. But yeah, it's interesting, very interesting.
Did you have another comment?
Yeah, might have just forgotten what it was, but let's see. Oh, I know, because I see Mr. O'Leary. So, I don't know exactly how we would fit this in, but I definitely am interested in the neighborhood engagement and the neighborhood, welcome, an opportunity to have them, welcome something like this into their neighborhood. And I was thinking about off-street or on-street parking, and neighbors have the ability to petition to, not have parking on a block if it's interfering, that type of thing. And like I said, I don't want to get too rigid or
Sure.
onerous about it yet. These are just really vulnerable parts of town that I think we have to be really sensitive to. Oh, I know the other piece was on the neighborhood, because I think the original conversation started with the idea of just walking to a neighborhood market.
Right.
And there are lots of places in Norman outside of Ward 4 that would really benefit. I mean, there are definitely neighborhoods in Ward 4 that don't have easy access to, fresh food. And, there are other places in Norman that could also benefit from that.
Absolutely.
Of people who maybe don't have transportation and really could use, some support. in
Well, I think in a lot of areas over basically East 12th, where all you have is the Walmart. You used to have the Super Saver over there, but even that's gone.
Yeah.
So there's a whole sector of the population that, you're right, if you don't have a car, it's really difficult to access groceries. And this would be one of those things that could maybe balance the equity between the east and west side, or really just try to spread the amenities around so everybody's covered.
Well, and trying to, really define the uses that are benefit to the
Right.
the residents around there,
Right.
and not trying to have yet another opportunity for maybe services that are available all over town.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so maybe the next step would be part of that teasing out what the variables are, is doing some neighborhood charrettes and actually getting some public feedback and seeing what do people want, what do they not want. And while we're doing that, simultaneously, you're kind of looking at these examples and seeing, from a analysis perspective, again, what works, what doesn't work. So maybe with those two data sets, we can marry them up and have a nice little checklist of, the kind of things we want to see. So,
Councilmember Hall brought up a really good point, and it is a concern. We're talking about the residential areas for the most part. We're talking about core Norman. We're talking about narrow streets. We already have some concerns with some of the on-street parking in some of the areas here in core Norman. So again, circling back around to using the existing area, really utilizing what they have. I don't want these to be a negative impact to the neighborhood. I know you don't either, but it's just putting those additional cars on the street, on an already narrow street, is I think that's things that the neighborhood's going to have to talk about, and it's more than a pre-development meeting. It's it's an opportunity for them to really meet with the applicant and hammer out what the concerns are to see how they can get that done.
well, and maybe there's a threshold where we say we're going to install parking meters in these locations to maybe discourage people parking there all day, every day. But you're there for 30 minutes, 45 minutes while you're in the place, and it's not. Maybe it's less of a burden on the neighborhood. I don't know. I think again, case by case basis.
So this just occurred to me too on the engagement piece. It would really be interesting. I mean, I definitely could pull together fairly quickly, neighborhood organizers in multiple neighborhoods in Ward 4, but, we're talking about what we think they want, and maybe we should flip that and say, what does your list look like? And what would you really, like, what's your highest priority of, like, what you'd like to see on the corner, and what do you absolutely not want to see?
I think that's more important almost. It's like, what are the forbidden uses? You just strike those from the list now and focus on only the things that are in high demand. So,
Yeah.
no, I mean, now the more we talk about it, I think that neighborhood engagement piece probably would be a pretty logical next step. I don't know how we go
If
about
the
working.
Neighborhood Alliance folks
I
could help
thought
us
about
with
that right when you mentioned.
I don't know if they've had any experience.
Well, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
Because
I think-
we've got
I know.
many other assignments going on that to have charrettes or something like that for I think it's great, but I mean, if that's something that they could do, if we could engage them to do that, that would be huge.
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to bridge that neighborhood police gap as well, because I think police will have a pretty interesting perspective on this idea.
And as far as I know, I don't believe we've been successful in hiring anybody for the Norman Neighborhood Alliance person.
I don't know. At last I heard we had not, but
Right.
it's been a couple weeks, so I've not heard.
Well, I know there's just been some challenges, unexpected challenges, so we're not as far along with the development with the Neighborhood Alliance, but it's a year contract that we have, and it will at least be worth asking, have they had any experience with this? Is this something they could help us with?
That would be nice.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think we've kind of looked at this from several angles. I think we've got some good action items moving forward. I'd love to bring this back to the committee at some point. I know we've got the next few months lined out, but maybe 4 months, 5 months from now, we can have some data to come back and discuss this again. And
I would like to go ahead and reach out to get with city manager and everything, but reach out to Neighborhood Alliance and at least get their feedback on what they think, if it's something that they could do, would do, or anything like that, and then that'll give us some base level starting points for what they're going to start at versus where we're going to start as far as research or what can be there and what can't. I don't know. Just
And is it too late to get this maybe worked into the engineering design review? That criteria that's going on right now?
I would say yes, but I will look to Mr. O'Leary for that one.
Still in committee review.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there's some part of that
Maybe so.
let us
Okay.
know.
Yeah, it'd be nice just to get their angle on it and kind of see if they're thinking of things that we might not think of. So, okay, we'll connect offline a little bit more about how to get that neighborhood involvement going, and if you've got any ideas of people that you think might help lead that.
Yeah. And then I don't know if this is just adding too much to the list, but, we do have a model in Center City for the live-work concept, and, you did show some examples from across the country that look like it might, so I don't know if we would want to think about allowing that type of use also.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think so. Well, I appreciate it, Ms. Hudson. I know you put a very informative presentation together with a lot of good stuff to chew on. So, I think that's all I've got for today. Anybody else have any thoughts? Okay. Well, this meeting is adjourned.
All right. Thank you.